Hi guys, I hope everybody's doing well. We are looking at circumference and area of a circle. So the first thing that we're going to start with is again, your favorite thing, some nice definitions here. So take a minute and pause the video and just go ahead and copy these definitions down, and then we're going to kind of go through some pictures and what they mean. Okay, so pause the video, copy these down, and then we'll go through them together. All right, so you should have all of these definitions down. Okay, so first of all, a circle, right, is just a closed 2D shape made by a curve, and it's always the same distance from the center point. Okay, so my circle won't look exactly like that, but it should. So again, every point on the outside of the circle is always the same distance from that center point. Okay, so the radius of a circle is just the distance between the center of the circle and any point on the circle. So if I have my circle here and I draw a point from the center over to the outside here, this is my radius. Okay, so it's going through that center point to any outside point on the circle. And then the diameter is all the way across, going through the center point. Okay, so the distance across the circle through the center point. Okay, so this would be my diameter. Okay, so if you know the radius, you can always just double it to get the diameter. Circumference of a circle is the distance around the circle. So kind of like when we talk about perimeter for other shapes is the distance around the outside of the figure. It's the same thing here for circumference. It's just the distance around the circle. Okay, so this would be my circumference, would be the distance around the circle. And pi, okay, you guys know the symbol here for pi is just the Greek symbol used to represent the ratio of the circumference to the diameter of the circle. And hopefully we know that pi is equal to 3.14, and then it keeps going on, but we're going to just use 3.14. And area of a circle, okay, is just the space inside of the circle here. So the square units inside of the circle would be the area. Okay, so area is the inside, circumference is the outside, and we use 3.14 for pi. So first thing here is the circumference formula for a circle. So for circumference, there's actually two formulas that we can look at. So the first one is 2 times pi times the radius. Okay, and we know that pi is 3.14, and then the radius is just this distance halfway across the circle. Okay, so for example, in this one, let's actually put in a number here. So let's say the radius is equal to 5. Okay, we would just go through and plug that into our formula. So you do need to write out the formula that you're using. So we would do 2 equals 2 times pi times the radius, and then we would plug in what we know. So 2 times 3.14 times the radius of 5. Okay, so we would plug that into our calculator, and we would get 31.4 units. Okay, the other formula that you can use for circumference, and it makes sense if you think about it, is instead of 2 times pi times the radius, you could do pi times the diameter, because 2 times the radius, right? If we did 2 of the radius, it would actually give us the diameter. Okay, so 2 pi times the radius or pi times the diameter, since the diameter is just actually the radius times 2. So you're going to choose which formula basically based on what you were given in the problem. So for example, on this first one, if I'm just given the radius here of 5.1, I'm probably going to do my 2 pi r since I have the radius. So I'm going to do 2 times 3.14 times the radius of 5.1. Okay, so I would just multiply that all out and get And it says here round to the nearest hundredth. Okay, so I would get 32.028, but because I'm going to round to the nearest hundredth, I would get 32.03 inches. Okay, and for number 2, here they're giving me the diameter. So now I'm going to use my formula pi times diameter. You could use whatever formula you want, but if they give you the diameter and you use 2 times pi times the radius, you're going to have to divide the 170 by 2 to get the radius. And then in the formula, you're actually multiplying it by 2, so you're kind of just undoing what you've already done. So it makes more sense just to use pi times the diameter. Okay, so I would multiply that. And I get 533.8 meters for the circumference. Okay, so these ones, again, they're asking you to find the circumference. The next part is kind of working backwards from that. So here they're saying the circumference is 70, find the radius, and then find the diameter. So again, we want to use our formula, and for these, I would actually always do pi times diameter, just because it's less information that you need to plug in. So I'm going to plug in my circumference, which is 70. I know that pi is 3.14, and then I'm trying to find the diameter. So if I'm solving this equation, 3.14 is being multiplied by diameter. So to undo that, I'm going to divide it on each side, because in an equation, whatever you do to one side, you have to do to the other. So I'm going to do 70 divided by 3.14 to get 22.29. And it says here round to the nearest hundredth. Okay, so 22.29, it was 29 repeating. Actually, it wasn't repeating, but we're just going to do 29 because then it was 2 again. Okay, so my diameter is 22.29 inches. Now, to get my radius, I'm just going to take my diameter and divide it in half, right? So to get my radius, I'm just going to take the diameter and divide it by 2. Okay, so that's going to give me 11.145. So that would be 1.5 when I round it to the nearest hundredth. Okay, so 11.145, oopsie, 1.5 inches. Okay, so same thing with number 2. I'm going to use circumference is pi times diameter, so that I just have to plug in less things. I know the circumference is 500, and then I'm going to plug in my 3.14 for pi, and then I don't know my diameter. So this is being multiplied, so to undo multiplication, the inverse operation there is division. Okay, so I'm going to do 500 divided by 3.14, and it gives me 159.235. So 159.235 would be 0.24 when I round it. Okay. And then again, to get my radius, I'm just going to take my diameter and I'm going to divide it by 2. And that gives me 79.62. Okay, so 79.62, and then make sure you put your units on there. Okay, so that's kind of how you work backwards to find your diameter and your radius. Even if they're not asking for diameter and radius, I would probably still, like if they're just asking for the radius, I would still use the formula with pi times diameter, and then just take your answer for diameter and divide it by 2. All right, so moving on here to area. Okay, so for area, it's the amount of space inside of a circle. So we know that area is equal to pi times radius squared. Okay, so we know pi again is still going to be 3.14, and then the radius is just over here halfway across the circle. Okay, we're going to square that. So for this first example, again, I'm going to write out my formula and then I'm going to plug in what I know. So 3.14 times 5.1 to the second power. So I'm going to do 3.14 times 5.1 to the second power. So there should be a squared button on your calculator that says like x squared, so you can use that. Or you can do the caret and then to the second, like to 2. So you can use either of those. Or if you don't have that, you could just do 3.14 times 5.1 times 5.1. Okay, so this is going to give me 81.67 when I round it to the nearest hundredth here. And area is always your inches or your units squared. Okay, so same thing for number 2, except for this one, they aren't giving us the radius, right? So we want to divide this in half. So they give us the diameter, we need the radius for the formula. So it's not like the circumference formula where there's a different formula you can use. So make sure you divide that in 2 to figure out that the radius is 85. Okay, so now again, I'm just going to plug this all into my formula and type it into my calculator. You could do 85 times 3.14. You could use the squared button. Okay, so I'm going to end up getting 22,686.5 meters squared. All right. So the last part here, this is going to be a little trickier with your calculators, so make sure you're paying attention here. If they give you the area, okay, you're trying to find the radius or the diameter. We're going to plug the area in. We know 3.14 is the pi button, okay, radius squared. So same thing, this is being multiplied by the radius squared, so the first thing that you want to do is divide this by 3.14. Okay, so 72 divided by 3.14 is going to give me a really long decimal. So this is where you need to kind of be careful with your calculator. You're going to keep that decimal in your calculator. Okay, so like it's 22.929 and then it keeps going. So you're going to keep that whole decimal in your calculator. So now we have r squared is equal to that really long decimal that's in your calculator. So what you need to do is you need to take the square root of r squared and that long decimal to figure out what r is. Okay, so the way that you can do that is, again, leave that decimal in your calculator. Don't clear it. And you're going to do the second. I'm going to write the directions out over here. You're going to do the second, and then you're going to hit the square root button. So leave the decimal in your calculator, hit second, and then the square root button, which is above the x squared button. Okay, and then you're going to do second and you're going to do answer. So second answer, I think the answer one is down on the bottom. It's the little subtraction sign, or not the subtraction sign, the minus sign, not the subtraction sign. That's different. So at the very bottom of your calculator. So do second and then that answer, and then it pulls in that really long decimal. Okay, and then if you just hit enter, it should give you your answer here, which is 4.788. So I'm going to round it to 79. Okay, so my radius is 4.79 inches. Okay, my diameter, I know that I would just double my radius. So I'm going to take my radius and multiply it by 2. Okay, and I actually, again, I took the not rounded version. So I left this decimal in my calculator and then multiplied it by 2 so I could get the most accurate answer here. So 9.577, which would be 5.8. Okay, so 9.58 inches for the diameter. Okay, so last one here, and actually the video is probably going to cut off on me, so I'm going to have to do, you know what I'm going to do? I'm not going to pause it. Okay, I'm going to have to do a separate video for number 2. So make sure you watch the separate video. Again, you probably will need your calculator for this stuff because you have to do the square root button. If you don't have your calculator, you can type in that whole long decimal, but that's just going to be a lot longer to do.